Dull people often wondered how it came about that Father Murchison and Professor Frederick Guildea were intimate friends. The one was all faith, the other all skepticism. The nature of the father was based on love. He viewed the world with an almost childlike tenderness above his long black cassock, and his mild yet perfectly fearless blue eyes seemed always to be watching the goodness that exists in humanity and rejoicing at what they saw. The professor, on the other hand, had a hard face like a hatchet, tipped with an aggressive black goatee beard. His eyes were quick, piercing, and irreverent. The lines about his small, thin-lipped mouth were almost cruel. His voice was harsh and dry, sometimes, when he grew energetic, almost soprano. It fired off words with a sharp and clipping utterance. His habitual manner was one of distrust and investigation. It was impossible to suppose that in his busy life he found any time for love, either of humanity in general or of an individual.
Are you ready to talk about what might be the gayest story we've ever done?
Hell yeah.
I think this one tops it. I think this one...
Yeah.
Yeah. To the degree that I picked up on it.
You usually pick up on it, don't you?
Usually I'm like half and half, like, I don't know if I'm just being inappropriate or what. This one is about two gay men who cannot talk about how gay they are.
Yeah.
Like, it's about the love that dare not speak its name.
Mm-hmm.
And how it manifests as a ghost. Am I wrong?
No.
Okay. Because halfway through this story, I searched how love came to Professor Guildea /gay. And it's like, oh, everything that's ever been written about this story is basically that thesis. And I was like, okay, I'm not nuts.
Yeah. This is a story about two men who are in love.
Yeah, and can't admit it.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think? I think the professor is the more in love of the two.
I agree.
Because I think that the reverend or the religious man,
mm-hmm.
I think he might be getting somewhere else.
Really?
Yeah, why not? He probably has pals.
I think maybe the reverend doesn't realize he's in love. And I think maybe the professor is the one who's like actively trying to shove that feeling down.
Right.
Until the end.
Is it like the Greek thing where they're like, no, it's simply that the love between men is more pure. And it's true love is between men. It's not sexual. It's just, that's the best kind. I think that's what the reverend is like feeling.
Yeah.
But who are we and why are we talking and what are we talking about?
Well, you're the one who always starts the intro, so.
Well, I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And it's Del Toro time. It's Del Toro time, and of course, we're not discussing Guillermo del Toro directly. We are discussing The Dark Descent, a collection of short stories by David G. Hartwell. We are at the Medusa in the Shield, which is the psychological horror section of the book, and we are discussing, what's the name of the story again?
How Love Came to Professor Guildea.
How Love Came to Professor Guildea, or Guildea. It's one of those, they never tell you how to pronounce it, so you just gotta listen to other people say it. But this is by Robert Hichens. What can you tell me about Robert Hichens?
Absolutely nothing. I didn't read the little bio section for this story.
Even the bio section doesn't really tell you much of anything. Robert Hichens, I never heard of him. I was unfamiliar with him. He's one of those people who was like one of the top-selling authors in the entire world at the time. And then everyone just immediately forgot about him. He was born in Kent, England in 1864. He died in Switzerland in 1950 at the age of 85. He lived pretty long, 85 years. He was really good friends with Oscar Wilde and Lord Alfred Douglas, who was like Oscar Wilde's like boyfriend, basically. Most people are just like Robert Hichens, a gay writer who never really came out. Some people said he may have been bisexual, but I mean, most people assume that now that Oscar Wilde was bisexual. Just people refer to them as gay until like relatively recently in history. But most of his friends were gay writers, and then he kind of turned on them and began writing exposés mocking that world. And so a lot of people were like kind of in that sense of like, I'm trying to throw everyone else off my trail. But also everyone's just like, there's no way he could have known as much as he did about this world without being a part of it. And he wrote his most famous work was called The Green Carnation, which was basically just a satire on Oscar Wilde and his circle of friends. And that came out in 1894. But he also wrote a lot of horror stories, psychological horror stories, a lot of gothic stories. I mean, the guy just wrote like crazy. And in 1900, he published a collection called Tongues of Conscience, which is gross. Like, I don't like the word tongue, and I certainly don't like the word tongues because that's plural. Tongues of Conscience, which included the story How Love Came to Professor Guildea. It was a popular enough book and a popular enough story that it itself was satirized repeatedly, and then everyone forgot who he was. And it wasn't until the 1970s when there was kind of this resurgence of interest in this world, in this era of British literature, that he started coming back into vogue. But most of his stuff is still out of print. You got to find old copies of it or scans or whatever, archives, in order to find it. But our illustrious editor saw fit to include it in the Medusa in the Shield as an example of psychological horror. And you think it fits the bill?
I think so, yeah. I mean, this is the only story in this section that's actually like giving me a little bit of chills.
Yeah, it's wild.
The scene with the parrot when they're hiding behind the curtain gave me chills.
Yeah, it actually icked me out. I was like, this is unpleasant.
Yeah.
So our illustrious editor says that this is Hichens' masterpiece, one of the greatest of all horror stories, successful as a moral investigation and as psychological anatomy, but it is in the latter area that it excels, rising above its contemporaries to stand beside Oliver Onion's The Beckoning Fair One and Le Fanu's Carmilla and Henry James' The Turn of the Screw as one of the landmarks of the novella form. It is a deconstruction of Victorian Christian morality under the guise of a moral tale that provides provocative contrasts on the one hand to Lucy Clifford's The New Mother, and on the other to Oliver Onion's The Beckoning Fair One. Onions alters the structure further by replacing Father Murchison's narrative view with that of an independent woman reporter, showing a break in horror and supernatural fiction of the period from the overt moral center to progressive interest in psychological investigation. Then he talks about Oliver Onions for a while. But it's interesting that in David Hartwell's notes, he never really, he mostly talks about it being a critique and a deconstruction of Christian morality, and never once mentions the fact that, I haven't read Beckoning Fair One in a long time, but Carmilla and Turn of the Screw are both reflections on sexuality, and notably what was considered at the time to be deviant sexuality. And I think that's where this story is the strongest.
Yeah.
So do you think David G. Hartwell just didn't pick up on the queer undertone?
Has he mentioned anything queer in any of his other notes?
I don't know if he has. I don't think he has. I'm wondering if it was the 80s, so he was like, I'm not even going to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, has he even mentioned authors being queer when they are?
I don't even think he did with like Clive Barker.
Yeah.
Who's like the ultimate at the time.
So maybe a bit of something coming out in there, or maybe he just didn't mention it.
I also wonder if maybe as a horror editor in the 1980s, if he was like, I'm going to alienate half of my potential readership, because especially at the time, I mean, now still, but even especially at the time, they're just the queer presence in horror had to basically have its own meetings at the time, because it was still a very what's the word I'm looking, I can't even think of, what is it called? Heteronormative, its ideas of gender and what's the masculinity? That's the word.
That's so stupid.
So stupid. You heard it here first. It's Del Toro time. Thinks that gender roles and heteronormativity and ideas of masculine are stupid. I agree. High five.
Which
So what's this story about? Like, why is this story so like gross and weird?
So basically, the story's about two men, Professor Munchkin. I can't remember his name.
Professor Guildea.
Not Professor. No. Father Munchkin.
Father Murchison. Not unlike. Oh wait, you're wrong. I'm sorry. I'm talking to the wrong child. I was gonna say not unlike Mr. Murchison from Ripley Underground, but that's Mitzi who read the Ripley books.
Yep.
Not
Father Murchison.
Father Murchison.
And Professor Guildea. Professor Guildea is a sort of what's a good thing to compare? Like a Severus Snape type character.
Yeah, a real misanthrope.
Yeah, and Father Murchison is like a member of the Lollipop Guild, I guess.
I was thinking of them actually in my head. It was Aziraphale and Crowley from Good Omens. It was the sort of just like wonderful. Oh, isn't humankind wonderful down in everyone sort of, and then you have this sort of guy who's just like people are the worst, but they're friends and maybe gay.
Oh, definitely gay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they meet, and everyone is like, "How did they become friends?"
Yeah,
but they did. And
it's a pretty believable friendship, even if it's just a friendship.
Yeah.
I like the way they do it. Like, they're fascinated by each other. They're both really smart. But yeah, Professor Guildea is like, I hate people. The best way to live my life is to never have anyone close to me. Also, I'm incredibly intelligent, and all of my inventions have helped mankind. But
also, I hate women.
Oh yeah. Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Has no patience for them. Even his manservant is a man.
Yep. And Father Murchison never says if he hates women or not. I don't think he hates anybody. I don't think he's capable of hating anybody.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
But he doesn't want to be with women.
Right. But he has the cover of being
a priest or a...
Yeah. I guess Church of England probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's covered, and Guildea hides behind his misanthropy.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic. I really enjoy reading these two.
I do as well.
In fact, I forgot for a while that it was going to be a horror story. I was just like, all right, this is fun. I wonder where this is going. It does do that thing that horror stories from the time do, where starts off with two gentlemen talking to each other about a philosophical concept that then just becomes the plot. Like, it'll be two guys being like, have you ever wondered what would happen if a hole opened up in the air and a series of spiders pulled through? It's like, oh, that could never happen. And then later on that would happen.
Yep.
And like all their theories would be tested. This at least has the excuse of Guildea's philosophy, assumedly bringing this thing about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because his whole thing is like, love is stupid.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally what it is. Love is stupid.
And Father Murchison is like, but have you considered love, though?
Right? And he's like, absolutely not. I hate everyone. I don't like to get close to anyone. I don't care about anyone. I don't even care about my manservant. I don't even know his name.
And Father Murchison is like, well, that's great. What if you what if you die, though? What if you start dying? Is your manservant going to help you then?
And he's like, no.
I don't care.
Yeah, it's the whole like, what if you start choking on something and you need someone to perform the Heimlich? You think this guy's gonna help you? And it's an interesting, like, he's not a bad guy. He just has he doesn't think he has any need but clearly he does, because he's hanging out with Murchison all the time. Like, he needs companionship.
He also he has a African gray parrot, doesn't he?
Well, he hates it though.
He doesn't hate it at first.
Well, he doesn't like, it's not a pet. It's because he gets it as to conduct experiments on, like psychological something about educational experiments. But it is interesting how Murchison's like, but you have this pet parrot, and he's like, not a pet, just a test subject. It's not a pet
copium.
What?
Not a pet copium.
What is that?
Coping.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's fine. Don't worry about it.
Are you making what? Is this one of those memes that I'm not hip to?
Yeah.
Dang it.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily a meme you're not hip to, or if it's a thing within my friend group, but...
Oh, I can has cheeseburger. I can has cheeseburger. Lolcats. So yes, he has a parrot that he pretends not to like. It's so interesting how the author of this Robert Hichens, was, according to everyone who knew him, exactly like this. He was a misanthrope who alienated everyone and who nobody really got along with. Interesting that this would be the character who seems most like him. So he's got a parrot. One day they're hanging out together and he goes outside because he sees somebody sitting on a park bench. Oh, by the way, it probably would help if you knew that the park that he lives across the street from at the time was and you knew this no matter who you were, was most famous for being a place where gay men would go to pick up other men and engage in illicit trysts. In fact, it got so much that it was like, it just became synonymous with being gay if you went to this park. Like, if you read this story at the time, you'd be like, oh, that's that park where guys go to pick up other guys. And what happens? He thinks he sees someone waiting on a bench and just has to run out of the house to investigate.
Yep.
and that's when the weirdness starts.
He picks up a guy.
Or
he picks up something.
Something, yeah. Because don't ever think for a second that this is going to portray his desires in a positive light. Like,
yeah.
This is still a man who was denying his sexuality in a time when it was illegal to be gay. So you find the clues, but you've also got to accept the fact that nothing good is going to come of this.
Yeah. Yeah, he picks up this thing, and brings it back to his house, apparently, and starts, he doesn't, you don't see it, he doesn't see it, but he just has this feeling that it's there. He caught the gay. The gay followed him home from the park. Wasn't gay when I went to the park. Then I met somebody there, and he gave me the gay. I think that's the story. Exactly.
But it is interesting, and it is the creepy part of the book starts now, because there is... I got into kind of not a back and forth. I got into a back and then forth, and then the conversation was over on Instagram with Haley Piper, the horror writer, horror author Haley Piper, amazing horror writer. Love her stuff, and I made a comment, sort of poking fun at the general. In horror movies now, there's always all horror movies are kind of not all horror movies, but a lot of horror movies have the same plot. Family is being haunted by a weird goblin. You find out the goblin is actually the trauma, or it's the pain, or it's the grief, or it's the rage, or it's something. And at the very end, it finally shows itself, and they either have to confront their trauma and destroy it, or don't confront their trauma and get absorbed by it. That's like every single movie like this nowadays, to the point where it's goofy, and like I was making a little fun of it. And she said, she's like, I'm fine with, horror being an allegory for an abstract concept. And I was like, I got off on the wrong foot. I kind of didn't make my point clear, which is I'm fine with that. I mean, clearly all horror is that. It's like it stands for these abstract concepts that we don't want to discuss, or we can't discuss. We don't have the language to discuss. But I also believe that the story should be able to stand on its own, even if you don't pick up on that. What I think a lot of modern movies do is they don't trust their audience enough, so they'll have characters be like, it latches onto our grief, or it latches onto our trauma, or they'll have like the whole family's like, it's a shame we're all still so sad that mama died. Like, it's that kind of thing where I'm like, we don't need that. Like, we're smart. What I love about this story is, even if you didn't pick if you didn't pick up on the, I won't even say subtext, the text, it's still super creepy. Like, it still works. It's a good story. And the subtext is just another delicious layer for people who are hip to it. I mean, clearly not everyone at the time really got what he was going for. And as you said up top, the stuff with the ghost or whatever it is unsettling because it's not malevolent. It is totally into him.
Yep.
But in that way that, like, the creepy person is totally into you. Yeah. They unfortunately compare it a lot to someone with, like, a mental disability.
Yeah.
They say, because I guess Murchison had a parishioner who had some kind of mental disability and would latch on to him, but couldn't communicate very well. And she was just sort of obsessed with him and would be hanging around all the time, like glomming onto him. And he was like, it was unsettling and I couldn't deal with it, which is what this ghost is doing. So they refer to it a lot using terminology that's a bit unkind for people. It's 1900. But you never really. It's not that. It's just it's like an entity. It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's not really human.
No, the parrot starts mocking its voice at some point, and the father's like, I have no idea what is happening.
Yeah. So tell us about the parrot scene, because it's bizarre.
So the professor has Father Murchison told the professor, look, you need to go on like a week-long vacation to get out of the city. I think you're like a bit stressed and overworked, and I think that's what's going on. So you should go take like a trip at sea or something. And the professor's like, you know what? Fine, I'll go. I'm fine. You're probably right. This doesn't make any sense otherwise.
Right.
So he goes and he comes back and he's doing a lot better. He has some color in his cheeks for the first time in the story.
Right.
And the father's like, great, I'm glad you're doing better. You should go back to your house and like make sure everything's okay. And the professor's like, you know what? I will. So he goes back to the house and not everything's okay.
No.
And he's like, I'm going to prove to you that this thing is here. So a couple days later, he invites the father over. They have some dinner, blah, 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 blah. They go back up to the study, and the professor's like, we're going to watch this bird, because you know what birds are? They're really smart and good at imitating. We're going to hide behind these curtains. Also, the thing has been in here the entire time and can definitely overhear our plans, but that's fine.
But it's also not seemingly intelligent.
Yeah. So the professor and the father hide behind the curtains, and Professor Guildea removes the like blanket from the top of the cage. And for a while, nothing happens. The bird just does bird things, and the father's like, oh no, my friend has gone insane.
Yeah.
And then the bird starts looking at something in the corner of the room, and there's nothing there. And it sort of like watches this thing move over to the bird, and then the thing starts scratching the bird's little head, and the bird's having a great time. And then the bird starts like moving weirdly, like bobbing its head strangely and twitching and stuff. And then it starts whispering in a weird voice.
I hate the voice.
It's a voice that you can't tell if it's masculine, feminine, in between. It seems to like change slightly.
Yeah, it's doing that thing that parrots do where they repeat what they hear.
Yep.
And unfortunately, what it's repeating is super creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what happens after that, but it's not good.
It kind of sells it to Father Murchison. He's like, okay,
yeah. There's something creepy in his house.
And there's something, but it's not just that it's creepy. It's that it's creepy and it's like always right here.
Yeah.
Like it's that thing where I have a friend who has a child who has autism. And one of the ways the child used to, not so much anymore, but used to express feelings and needs was they would have to be in physical contact with my friend all the time, like face to face, like face, hands on your body, face against your face, even if you needed to be alone. And as much as they were compassionate and loved their child, they were also expressed to us the fact that it was driving them nuts. Like, because you always have a person in your personal sphere and not be able to do anything about it. And this is the same thing, except you also can't see it. You just know it's there, like always in front of you. It's like being in the dark and knowing there's someone breathing down your neck, but also that they kind of are into you and dig you and only want to be close to you because they love you. It's gross. It's not to compare this to like an autistic child, obviously. I'm just trying to illustrate the sense of like never being able to get away from physical contact with a person, because you're never being able to, like, you can see where that would be like driving Professor Guildea to distraction. He can't sleep, he can't think, he can barely eat. And this is where Murchison's like, don't you have like a big speech you have to give coming up, a big honor award you're getting? Why don't you just go do that and get away from this ghost for a while? And he does. And does it work?
No,
because the ghost follows him.
Yeah, it didn't follow him the first time.
No.
But it followed him the second time. And it was all over him on stage, and he freaked out because who wouldn't? And The father reads in the paper an article about what happened and is like, oh, goodness gracious. Guess I'd better get going.
And
so he goes to the professor and is like, my guy, what's going on? And the professor's like, I'm wrapping myself in a rug so I can stop being touched.
Yeah.
It's not working. And the father is like, okay, well, I'm going to talk to you like a preacher now because clearly being a friend isn't working. So he's like, have you considered the fact that you did this by refusing to love people and accept love? And the professor's like, that's stupid. That's the stupidest thing you've ever said to me. What is wrong with you? The father's like, maybe you just need to accept and learn to love this thing.
Yep.
And the professor's like, I'll tell you what I can do. I can tell it that I hate it and I want it to die. And I want to die. And the father's like, all right, man. And the professor's like, it's gone. It's great. And then he dies.
Well, okay. He screams at it. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. And it does go away.
Mm-hmm.
It goes away. And the reason it got in the house in the first place, he thinks, is because when you say it out loud, it sounds really obvious. But it's like, because he went to the gay park and left the door open. And it came into his house. Like, yeah. And so it goes away. And he's like, shoo. And then Father Murchison looks out the door and he's like, you know, I think I do see something sitting on that bench in the gay park over there. I'm going to go investigate. Whoops, I left the door open. He gets back and the professor is dead.
Yeah.
And it is that weird thing where it's like, your friend who genuinely cares about you tells you, maybe you should just accept these feelings. Maybe you should just let the love in. Maybe you should just say, okay, I love this. No, I'm going to deny it and hate it. And oops, it killed you. Like it seems obvious, but he's a good enough writer that it doesn't come across as like.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that the gay character dies, because they always die in these stories, but not because he's gay, but because he won't live the life he wants to live. Like, it kills him. Like, the repression kills him.
And repression kills a lot of people.
Yeah. It's very, like, just for 1900, it's very insightful.
Yeah.
And
it's very insightful. I mean, repression does cause a lot of people to die or not to live.
Or to die. I just did a whole thing for work on stroke and cardiovascular health in the LGBTQIA plus population, and how stroke and cardiovascular problems are way higher among people, partly because of all the, well, I guess I'll turn to smoking and drinking and drugs to, you know, deal with all this, but also just the stress of constant either repression or dealing with the jerks in the world. You know, family, coworkers, people who are asses.
It is apt that the cause of death in this story is a heart attack.
Yeah, ghost attack. It's not even a ghost. We don't even know what it is.
No, it's just a manifestation of repressed sexuality that I think the father saw because he realized that he was in love with the professor.
Why did the parrot see it?
The parrot's gay.
Rock? I was going to say, I couldn't give anything to say.
I think the parrot saw it because the parrot is a manifestation of the professor's need for companionship.
So it's part of the professor.
Yeah.
I mean, not a manifestation. It's an actual parrot.
It is a real parrot.
Yeah.
He sells it at one point before everything goes terribly.
He does. It's that thing of just like, I'm going to get rid of the stuff that reminds me about this.
Yeah.
Like it's the whole like, hey, where'd your collection of like Larry Kramer books go? I got rid of all of that. If I get rid of all that stuff out of my room, I'm not going to have to deal with what I'm feeling.
Yep.
Yeah. I got rid of the parrot. The parrot just kept repeating things at me that reminded me of all this. It's an interesting story, but I have to emphasize and repeat what you said, which is it's also genuinely creepy.
Oh yeah.
Like what a creature. Like even more so than like anything in like an M.R. James story. M.R. James had some creepy spirits, but something that just likes you and is just always there. Like when you wake up, when you lay down in bed, when you go to the toilet, it's just like looking at you, but you can't see it.
I don't think I could deal with that.
Yeah, I think I would go just away. I don't know what I would do.
I think I would just be like, all right, I at least want to be able to see you, which means I too need to become a ghost. So let's go.
Or you do what maybe Professor Guildea should have done and just been like, all right, zip. I mean, it's clear what the ghost wanted to do.
Hey, either that or you tell it that you hate it and you want it to leave, and you don't have your friend there who's going to go out and open the door,
back up
and let it again.
Your good friend you have a crush on who opens the door back up? Yeah, he should have been like, it's gone. Now please leave out the back. Please don't go out the front door towards Gay Park. Please go out the other door.
No backdoor stuff in this story, unfortunately.
Wah, wah, wah. She walked in through the outdoor. That's my joke. That's my Prince joke. Hyde Park is the
Hyde Park.
Yeah, yeah. There is a great article I read by Nick Freeman from the Modern Language Review from 2016. It's floating around out there. It's called What Kind of Love Came to Professor Guildea? Robert Hichens, Oscar Wilde, and the Queer Ghosts of Hyde Park. And it's like a 19 or so page long academic paper that's all about this. It's what I read that just talked about Hyde Park Place. It talked about the legitimacy, like the use of the word morbid in this is also morbid meant something different in 1900 England than it does now. Homosexuality was referred to as morbid. And there's a lot of coded language in this story that just went right over my head until I started reading more about it, because it's not just coded because you have to be like part of the gay culture. It's also because it's not 1900 anymore. So morbid tales weren't horror stories so much as stories that kind of went against the moral grain. Homosexual proclivities were seen as morbid.
You got the morbs?
You got the morbs, exactly. It's Morbin time, and it's Morbin time in Hyde Park. So I would honestly say that this might be a very un-Guillermo del Toro type story from my perspective. I don't know how Guillermo del Toro, I don't think he does gay very often.
I also don't think he does like unseen.
Right. It does seem like it would go against his... He could probably give us a pretty creepy parrot, though.
Yeah.
But like his sexuality in his stories always seems to very much be of the heterosexual kind. And when he did do the tragic gay character in The Shape of Water.
Yeah.
But again, that was like the tragic gay character. And I don't know, maybe if he did this one as Cabinet of Curiosities, maybe he'd get a gay filmmaker to really explore that.
I don't know. I don't think this needs to be adapted into a movie or episode of anything.
Well, would it surprise you to find out that in 1948, this story was adapted for the radio show Escape. It was a radio play. It's like 30 minutes long. It's freely available. Just go to YouTube and you can listen to this. And it's interesting because it's played fairly straight. Like, just, it's the story. And they have to change a few things just for radio because you can't what the parrot's doing. And they compress the time a little bit, but it's basically the same tale. Paul Frees, who is a very famous voiceover actor, he played like Boris Badenoff in Bullwinkle and a billion other voices that you would recognize. He does the voice of the parrot, which is pretty funny. It's just a guy being like, hello, hello, hello. But it's a good example of if you lose the narrative, if you lose the voice of the author and just tell the story with dialogue, none of the subtext is there. Yeah. Even though they don't change anything. It just becomes a couple of British guys haunted by a ghost. It's not a very effective.
See, this is what I mean, because people are like, shows and movies can do so much more than books can. It's got all the like visuals and stuff, like blah blah blah. And I'm like, but it also like takes a lot away.
Yeah, because it's different
Yeah,
mediums.
there's two different forms of media, and like the author's voice in books, some people think it's whatever.
Mhm.
And, like some people are like, the better books you can't even tell who the author is. I
Right.
disagree. I think that the stronger the voice of the author is, the more engaging a book is. At least for me personally,
Mhm.
unless it's like bad. I mean, this is all like
This is a bad voice.
this is a bad voice. Like obviously, just take it or lose it. But because the author adds so much to the text.
Yeah.
I like knowing what the authors are thinking and what their intentions are.
Right.
It gives another layer to the story that I don't think we'd have otherwise.
Yeah, and I just think it's important, especially for a story like this, which isn't so much about what happens as about who it's happening to and why,
and when, and where,
and when, and where, and how. So that is How Love Came to Professor Guildea by Robert Hichens. And surprise, surprise, we've got another story coming up. What is the next story? Oh, because this one was a novelette.
Yep.
The next one is basically the back of a cereal box.
That it is.
What's it called?
I'm checking. Born of Man and Woman.
By? We said it last time.
Dick Math.
Dickie the Math Man. By old
Is this
Dick
our
Math.
second Richard Matheson story?
It's either this. Well, we did Duel and we did something else. We've talked about Dick Math a lot.
I
think just because I like saying Dick Math.
We did Duel the movie, right?
We did Duel the movie, but we've talked about him again.
Yeah, I think because we were looking through the stories.
Maybe.
And I saw his name.
Oh, he wrote I think he wrote screenplay to something else.
Yeah.
He's been around. And there was one where I remember we talked about the fact that he has a son also named Richard Matheson.
Yeah.
And so there's stories by Richard Matheson and there's also stories by Richard Matheson.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, we will be discussing Born of Man and Woman on the next episode. Richard Matheson. And it is I say it's like a back of a cereal box. It is literally 5 pages long. It is the shortest story we will ever cover.
It's not 5 pages long. It's 3 pages long.
I'm looking at it on my my e-reader. So yeah, it's a 3-page story. It's going to be a nice palate cleanser after this one, which was fairly long. So yes, join us next time for Born of Man and Woman. If you're in the Twin Cities area at the beginning of August, I will be performing in the Fringe Festival, the Minnesota Fringe Festival, doing a show based loosely on my other podcast, Deep in Bear Country.
And I'll also be there.
And you'll be there. You're also helping me write it. So
that I am. I'm also going to be in a little box looking at light stuff.
You are. You're going to be up in the booth. So if you're in the Twin Cities area at the beginning of August, look up the Minnesota Fringe Festival and come see Lost in Bear Country. I will be gadding about on stage. So anything else?
I'm not doing a live show or really anything, to be honest. So no.
No. You're in Illinois right now.
I am Illinois. I'm having a blast. That might be why my audio sounds slightly different, because I don't know what the acoustics in this place are like.
Right.
So yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you're in Illinois, swing by and say hi to Willow. Otherwise, I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And we'll see you when it's Del Toro time.
I snapped my finger when I did that, so that's going to get picked up on the microphone. All right.
Snappity snap.
Bye.